I'll just jump since we're pushed for time. Oh, Richard, I'm working in, and I want to look at some of the key concepts around super contribution and open scholarship. So, or 11 years ago, should I say, the term crowdsourcing was coined by Jeff Howe in an article in Wired magazine, which he placed crowdsourcing very much in the context of the emerging when the internet age being designed to take advantage of the network world, technological advances, ironically, in everything from product design, etc., etc. So he talks about this not being outsourcing, but crowdsourcing, the idea of tapping into dispersed, networked reserves of creativity, of innovation, and of product work. So, what has happened in the last 10 years? Well, in the worlds of scholarship and academia, certainly something has happened. Here we go. We have a plethora, a proliferation, should I say, of projects which take advantage of the kind of networked tapping into these pools of creativity which Howe was talking about. And I think it's very germane to remember that in the mid-2000s, in 2006, you know, this was the era in which Facebook is incorporated in 2004, Twitter is incorporated in 2006. This is the time at which the web starts becoming interactive. And in my view, if we want to approach ideas of open scholarship in the kind of the light of crowdsourcing and what's happened in the last 10 years, we need to recognize this bigger context in which crowdsourcing / open scholarship actually sits. Now, last year, you may recall, there was a rather high-profile and well-known example of crowdsourcing which hit the headlines, which was an exercise by the UK's Natural Environment Research Council to crowdsource the name of its new multi-million pound research vessel. In second place, essentially the crowd out there was asked to nominate names for this new ship, and then the public were invited in a general vote to vote which was the most popular. So in second place, we have the Royal Research Ship RRS Poppy May. In third place, the RRS Henry Worsley, who's a famous Arctic explorer. In fourth place, the RRS David Attenborough. Now, in fifth place, we start to get an impression that the British public was not taking this task as seriously as NERC was hoping, with RRS It's Bloody Cold Here. But of course, the winner by 124,000 votes was the RRS Boaty McBoatface. It was this essentially a rather unsophisticated joke at NERC's expense. Nonetheless, the world's media had an awful lot of fun with this, and essentially the internet went mad, essentially sort of mocking this decision, or rather at least highlighting it in a way that I think NERC probably wouldn't have wanted. However, I mean, one could say that this was very successful, because after this episode, how would one say it, the kind of awareness of NERC's work in polar research certainly had a much higher public profile. However, was this episode real crowdsourcing or real co-production? And if not, why not? Well, what one might call classical cultural or his academic crowdsourcing projects are exemplified by activities such as Transcribe Bentham, which you see here. This is a project at UCL to put into marked up, machine-readable XML text for handwritten papers of the philosopher Jeremy Bentham, which is something that is beyond any computer to do by automated means. Writing was, and anyway, this has been hugely successful. It's very widely published. It is a very high-profile kind of poster-child crowdsourcing project for. It's been really successful in curating and managing the tasks that the transcription tasks. You know, there is only one correct way of marking up a manuscript. There is only one way of transcribing manuscript text correctly. Another poster child project from the last 5 years or so is the British Library's Viewer project, where they put up scans of historic maps from their collections and then ask the public to add them in order to allow those maps to be properly metadated for search and retrieval purposes. So, speaking as a map geek myself, maps inspire a great deal of interest and obsessiveness indeed. And this certainly figures for the British New in somewhat legendary terms have 725 5 days or so by around 90 super engaged participants. So I think one of the real questions for crowdsourcing in the 21st century for co-produced open scholarship is how on earth do we find these participants, you know, who are level of activity. So to answer that, or to think about why that might be, I'm going to turn to an interview I conducted last week, in fact, with a super contributor to multiple projects. And because this interview hasn't been formally published yet, I think to be on the safe side with ethics, I'm not going to reveal the person's identity. But this contributor talks about what drew them in the first place, about the possibilities of why exposing data to the web was important. So she's taking on board, you know, why this was important in scholarly terms. She talks about accessibility and, you know, why it is important for scholarship for resources such as, for example, Transcribe Bentham to be openly accessible. And that's something about this contributor, but I won't reveal any more. But she says, besides that, she is prepared to make kind of sacrifices of her time to make stuff that she's not interested in similarly available. And I think this kind of thinking about what an individual brings to a project, what it costs them in terms of their time, their commitment and their energy is really, really important. And when I sort of tweeted a blog post this person had written, a colleague tweeted back that many great points are made by them to show that actual experiences defy simplistic critical science and technology studies framing of crowd scholarship. And I think this is absolutely right. We have to look for new epistemologies of how we engage with these super contributors and allow their roles to evolve. And I'm nearly at the end of my 8 minutes, I think, so I will conclude by asking if 2017 is a good year for crowdsourcing. Well, I think Howard was right when he said crowdsourcing is about networks, especially about the internet as a network, and this kind of post-Berners-Lee interactive web is what has got crowdsourcing to where it is today. But the internet has changed since then. It is now bi-directional. It is not the kind of mid-early 2000s unidirectional network. And we need to think about what this means for co-creation with the crowd as authors and observers and as meaning makers. And most importantly, I think we need to get away from the idea that open scholarship is necessarily about recreating academic perfection as we know it in the enclosed, sterile environment, I use the word advisedly, of the university or the institution. We have to recognize that it costs us, it costs the contributors, it can go wrong, it can fail, it is not some kind of perfect chimera that perhaps we thought about might be in the mid-2000s. So I'm definitely out of time now. I hope I haven't been talking to myself because the Skype connection's gone down again. And I think that concludes what I have to say. Thank you.